is one of our board members, Jim McGrath.
Hi.
How
you doing? Nice to meet you.
Next Thursday at 7.
Had a luncheon for some of those people that had those glass milk bottles and things, and they came
I
up.
did. I'm sorry you couldn't join us.
Well, they came up to, I guess, your house to, see what you had and talk about the collections.
You're
and
absolutely
everything.
right, Sue. You are so right. You should be a journalist.
They said that it was the best lunch they had ever had.
Well, they don't get out much if that's the case, but I'll take it.
He was just thrilled with it. He just thought it was the greatest thing. Whatever you did, it must have been good.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Yeah, he
I'm glad
was.
they enjoyed it.
He was.
As long as their
Surf and
standards.
chirp luncheons.
I guess so. I guess
Yeah,
so. As
he-
long
he
as they
just-
keep their standards low, I'll
He
be
just
sure to meet
bragged
them.
about it, so he was thrilled with it.
Well, good, good. Vince is a great guy. He's wonderful. I wish he lived in Cattaraugus County. He's a great asset to Chautauqua County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were lucky. He's the one that talked about it, I think, was the one that came from Holland with his milk box
Okay.
collection.
Right.
And he put up his own display in one of the cabinets.
Oh, good.
And while we were, I guess it was on the weekend or maybe Monday or Sunday sometime, the shelf collapsed, and
In the
all,
showcase?
yeah, it collapsed in such a way that it didn't do any damage at all.
Oh.
We were so fortunate. It kind of put the milk bottles together sometimes, but they didn't get nicked. They were absolutely fine. But he was the one that, the actual owner was the one that put the milk bottles in the cabinets. So in a way, we didn't feel like if there was any damage, it was our fault because we didn't put them in there. He did, but absolutely nothing was
Were they our
disturbed.
cabinets or his cabinets?
Hmm?
Whose cabinets are they? His or ours?
Ours. But we were so fortunate, not anything got scratched.
Sticky wicket.
It's a real milkshake, any way you look at it.
We
Wow.
were just plain fortunate.
Right.
We went by the cabinet, looked, and oh my gosh, the milk bottles were all over the place.
Skew, right. That's
And
awful.
Sharon, she was so nervous about it, she wouldn't even let me help put it back together. In fact, she didn't put it all back together. She put it in the archival room, all the bottles in a very special place. Yeah, and she thought that it would be up to Brian to put it back together.
So things worked out pretty well then.
It's good, I mean, I don't know what happened. We couldn't figure out why he put enough or so many milk bottles in there that it would collapse the glass. It didn't ruin the glass shelf either.
Older than me.
Got very
Really
lucky.
a lot older.
We were.
I think it's
So scary at first, and then we checked out everything, and Sharon said, "You go home. I'm all nerved up. I got to do it by myself."
Well, we got very lucky.
That's terrible. The shelves gave out. Never heard of such a thing. How did the shelves collapse?
We're not really in City Ground. Yeah. We're from.
Oh, so the whole thing. Nice. Nice. I guess we'll save it for a different day. Let's put it this way. Someone else thought. Someone. Now they just heard.
Yes, I was chuckling.
For the museum. Whatever we need.
My father did.
Keep taking it. Well, that's the thing.
I always practice.
I was just reminding him that he's within earshot of the microphone, so he needs to be on his best audience behavior. Sit down.
There's a hole right there. He keeps rocking it. He can't find a comfortable spot.
I don't think he's held a chair still that he sat in his entire life, so I just don't know. Just don't hit anyone behind you. Don't bump into Mr. McGrath.
No, you're fine. I'm good. Plenty of room.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Hello. Good evening.
How's everyone doing tonight? Ready to hear some music?
We're ready.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I really need to say much to introduce our performer tonight, because if you've been coming to our programs for the last 6-7 years, you've surely seen him before. And if you haven't, then you're probably here because you came specifically to see him. But Dave has been coming here for a number of years. He's done a lot of different programs for us on different topics, and every one of them has been amazing. This year we're doing something a little different in that it's not immediately local. We're still New York State. We're doing music of the Adirondack region, but I still think that it's an important subject for New Yorkers, and I think everyone here will get a lot out of it. So again, thank you for coming out tonight, and please welcome our musician for tonight, Dave Ruch.
It's always a highlight of my summer, so it's great to be here. I hope you guys in the back can hear okay. We don't have microphones or speakers or anything, but if you need to, feel free to move closer. How many have spent time in the Adirondacks? Wow, look at that. All right, I know you two have. It's a place I've been lucky to spend an awful lot of time over the last 30 years since I met my wife. I grew up in Western New York, Williamsville, outside of Buffalo. My wife grew up in Utica, and so it was just an hour for her and her friends to go up to the Old Forge area in the Adirondacks. So one of the first things she asked me when we first met was, "Do you like to go hiking?" And I said, "I think so." I hadn't really done a lot of it, but she said, "Well, you like the Adirondacks, right?" And I said, "I don't think I've ever been to the Adirondacks." So she changed that real quick, and just fell in love with the area, as just about everybody does who goes. 6 million wild acres, very interesting sort of public-private experiment with people living inside this state park. Yes?
And you have Wanakina up there.
Wanakina.
Yes.
Yeah. So we ended up buying a place in Piercefield, about a half hour from Wanakina in St. Lawrence County. Are you from Wanakina originally?
No. My brother, my father, my uncle all went to Wanakina, and my sister was the first girl to go there.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. So we're going to have some music from up in that region. It's a region that not only has a lot of the old music been documented, which is not the case in other parts of our state necessarily, but it's also the only region of the state that I've come across where there are still living links to this old music. There are still people who inherited music the old-fashioned way by learning it from an ancestor, who learned it from their ancestors, who learned it from their ancestors. There are fiddlers up there playing fiddle tunes that no one knows the name of, but they learned it from a family member and passed it down through the generations. And there's singers up there, one woman in particular, Colleen Cleveland, is a fifth-generation ballad singer of these old unaccompanied songs. So it's a living tradition up there still, this old traditional music. And so I'm delighted to be able to share some of it with you tonight. I will play a song and then we'll talk some more. The old man, he came home one night, his young wife to see. And there he found another coat where his coat ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a bed quilt your mother sent to me. We'll wait that out.
Goes on for a while. It'll go on for a while.
Oh, cute. I thought it might be my pacemaker. It's not a real fire.
No, this happened last time you were here.
Same time, same
Must be
station.
the singing.
Well, if you can hear me, I'll keep going.
Okay.
Nobody's climbing
I'll start over. The old man, he came home and had his young wife to see. There he found another coat where his coat ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. Yeah, that's only a bed quilt your mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more, but buttons on a bed quilt I ain't never seen before. The old man, he came home the next night, his young wife to see. And there he found another arm where his arm ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a rolling pin dear mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more. The fingers on a rolling pin I ain't never seen before. The old man, he came home the next night, his young wife to see. And there he found another head where his head ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a cabbage head dear mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more, but a mustache on a cabbage head I ain't never seen before. I was flipping around in this book one day about 15 years ago. This is a wonderful book. It's called Adirondack Tales. It was written by a woman who grew up in the northeast corner of the Adirondacks in the 1880s in a little town called Reber, New York. And she went on to a successful career in journalism, and when she retired, she moved back to this little hardscrabble area of the Adirondacks, and she took up painting and started to paint scenes of what she remembered her little farming community looking like 60 years earlier. And she wrote a bunch of basically reminiscences about what life was like on that little farm. And so I was flipping through it one day, and there's all kinds of fun tales in there, and I got to a page that said an old song at the top, and I thought, okay, this is for me. So I read it, and of course I recognized that maybe some of you have heard a version of that song before. Oftentimes the man is coming home drunk in the Irish versions and the Appalachian versions, and the story that unfolds makes a little more sense. But the version she had heard in her community was a teetotaling version. There was no alcohol involved, but And she had no idea what the song was. She didn't know the name of it. She just called it an old song. It was a song she'd heard people sing when she was young. So that's exactly and of course it can be traced back to it's a several century old ballad from the old world, from Ireland and Scotland. But this is the music that I've been so busy with for the last 20-some years, is the stuff that our ancestors played and sang for their own entertainment back when people did that sort of thing. So I met a wonderful woman in my quest to find more of this great old music named Ermina Pinkham. I heard about her from other people who said if you're interested in old Adirondack music, you have to meet this woman. But I figured with a name that good, she must be interesting. So I called Ermina Pinkham up. They gave me her phone number. I didn't know what to expect on the other end of the line. And I got about a sentence and a half into explaining who I was and what I was calling about. And I was then entertained for about the next 45 minutes with story after story. Ermina was born in 1930. She's sadly no longer with us, but I knew her for the last 7 years of her life. Spent an awful lot of time with her, playing music with her and recording interviews with her. But she was born in 1930 in the Wells, New York area, Sacandaga Lake area in the Adirondacks. And her family, she had traced her family's roots there back to the 1790s, so they've been there continuously since then. And she came from a very musical family. So her father played the fiddle, her uncle played the banjo, her grandfather played the fiddle for square dances, her grandmother played the piano for square dances, her grandmother sang, and so she said she was just surrounded by music. Her first memories are the family sitting around at night playing music together. She said, I grew up thinking that's what every family did, you know. And by the time she was 5 years old, she had been given a little banjo ukulele, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but it's kind of the size of a ukulele, but it's got a little banjo resonator head. And she said she just immediately picked it up as a 5-year-old and was able to play a couple of tunes, including, she said, Go Tell Aunt Nabby, which is their version of Go Tell Aunt Rhody. And I said, well, how did you know what to do? How did you know how to play it? She said, I had just been watching their fingers, and I just had an idea where to put my fingers. And so then as she got a little older, when her dad would go to work, she'd crawl up on a chair and take the fiddle down off the wall that she was admonished not to ever touch. She couldn't help herself, so she taught herself to play the fiddle without anybody knowing. And then one day, family sitting around playing music together at night, and her dad says, you know, Ermina, you seem to really like this music. I bet you could learn to play the fiddle someday. And she said, oh yeah, maybe I could. So he handed her the fiddle and she started to play it. Which, I've tried the fiddle, and man, that's a steep learning curve. I have not gotten over the ridge on that one. But just a wonderful woman who, again, had this music that had been passed down in her family. She had a great uncle who had been in prison during the Civil War down south, and he was a fiddler. And he came back, he walked back at the end of the Civil War, back to Speculator, New York with his fiddle and some music he had learned down there. And so the family's been playing this music ever since and singing these old songs. I'll sing you their version of a widespread logging song, a song from the lumber camps up there, called the Woodsman's Alphabet. It has a logging term for each letter of the alphabet. If you don't know about the logging industry up there, basically the guys, and it was all guys. There might be one woman in a logging camp, and that was the cook. And well, there's another story about that. But so these guys would go back in the woods in the fall to cut the timber, and they'd stay through the winter. If the logging operation was far enough back into the woods, they would just stay there in these temporary housing units that the logging companies built, called bunkhouses or shanties. And so they'd be cooped up there all winter long, and there was a grand tradition of entertaining each other because they had no other form of entertainment. So this is one of the songs that would be passed around. Her family's version is just a little unique from all the others I've heard of this song. This is the Woodsman's Alphabet. A is for axes, you very well know. B is for the boys who use them also. C is for the chopping we so early begin. D is for the danger that all boys are in. E is for the echoes that through the woods ring. F is for the foreman that leadeth our gang. G is for the grindstone so swiftly doth turn. H is for the handle so smoothly is worn. I is for the iron that marketh our pine. J is for the joker that's not far behind. K is for the keen edge our axes doth keep. L is for the lice that keep us from sleep. M is for the moss that we stuff in our camps. N is for the needle that mendeth our pants. O is for the owl that hoots in the night. P is for the pines that always fall right. Q is for quarreling we never allow. R is for the rivers we run our logs down. S is for the sleds that stand up so strong. T is for the teams that haul them along. U is for the use that we put our teams to. V is for the valley we run our roads through. W is for the woods that we leave in the spring. Now you've heard the song I was going to sing. X, Y, and Z, these are the last three. No mortals on earth are as happy as we. Hi derry, ho derry, hi derry down. The shanty boy's happy when nothing goes wrong. So merry, so merry, so merry are we. No mortals on earth are as happy as we. Hi derry, ho derry, hi derry down. The shanty boy's happy when nothing goes wrong. Lumberjack's alphabet. So Ermina's grandmother, as most people of those generations did, sang these songs without any musical accompaniment at all. They just sang them a cappella to tell the story. And these are songs that were not sung as a performance. They were sung just to entertain yourself or your family or your co-workers. So Ermina put those chords to it, and I said, well, how did you know what the chords should be? If your grandmother always sang it without any music, how did you know what chords to put behind it? And she said, well, I just knew. I could just hear. But it's funny, if you just heard that, that's a very kind of like country western treatment of the song. Ermina was a product of the 1930s and 40s where all the what they called hillbilly music was coming in on the radios. So to her, that's what sounded right against this old logging ballad. You know, other families would sing it differently and play it differently. Fascinating. So I'll play you a couple of pieces of fiddle music on my mandolin because I'm not a fiddle player. That I learned from Ermina. These are things that have been in her family. The first one is they called Johnny Smoker. It's a song from the minstrel shows. It's actually called Johnny Booker or Johnny Booker. She would sing it with the minstrel show lyrics, which I will not do. I will just play the melody because it's a fun melody, and then I'm going to put that together with another piece I learned from her, which they always called Uncle Abe's tune because the great uncle who came back from the Civil War brought this song back to the Adirondacks, and they've been playing it ever since, and no one knew what it was, and they didn't care what it was, they just liked the song. Yeah, so I'm going to play it, and then I will tell you something else that's fun. So, Old Johnny Smoker and Uncle Abe's tune. I mentioned that she had traced her family history back to the 1790s in the Wells area, but she traced it back further over across to England, and she told me she'd always wanted to go over there and kind of see what it looked like, and she never, unfortunately, got the chance. But in 2009, I got to go over there and I did a concert tour in England for about a week and a half, and while I was there, I taught Uncle Abe's tune to a couple of British musicians who were playing squeezy reed instruments, a melodeon and a concertina. And so the three of us, myself and these two British musicians, I taught them Uncle Abe's tune, and we played it together, and I recorded it. And when I came home, I played the recording for Ermina, and the thought that this peculiar little tune that they'd been playing in their family had made it across the ocean, and British musicians were playing it and enjoying it and making it sound good. She cried. It was such a great moment. One more Ermina story before we move on. She said, at night the family would be, after the chores are done, they're sitting around the wood stove, especially in the wintertime, they'd be peeling apples, and Dad brings out the fiddle and starts playing, and she had a very specific memory when she was about 4 years old of her grandmother, who the music came from, bouncing her on her knee, little Ermina, and leans down in her ear and she whispers, she says, "Do you hear how your father's playing that piece of music right there?" And little Ermina goes, "Uh-huh." And she goes, "Do you hear exactly what he's doing?" "Yes." "That's not how it goes." It goes like this. And she said, then she trotted out a slightly different rhythm, because Grandma didn't like the way her son was playing the music. I was getting too fast, maybe, but she said, "I've had these jigs and reels and hornpipes drilled into me since I was a little kid." So, what a great woman. Well, I hope you feel like singing, or some of you do. Some of these songs have wonderful little refrains. This is one that landed in the southern Adirondacks. It clearly goes back to the old world again. It tells of, in the earlier homes, the days of homespun, as they call them, if you were living out in any sort of area away from the urban centers, and you had daughters that lived with you, the daughters didn't always have a lot of choice in terms of if they were looking for, let's say, a suitor. And so anytime any new person came into the community, or a peddler even came by, if they were of a certain standing, the daughters were always encouraged to take a good, long, hard look at them and see if they were maybe somebody that they would want to pursue as a potential husband. And so the man that comes around in this song is so peculiar that not only, and of course the oldest daughter would be given first dibs. Not only does the oldest one not want him, but neither of the other two do either. So it's got a great little refrain if you feel like singing. A man who was old came a-courting one day, and you'll sing, all three girls wouldn't have him. So let's try that. All three girls wouldn't have him. Yeah. And then I'll sing another line, and then your second line is, with his old shoes on and his leggings. Try that. With his old shoes on and his leggings. So the first line is, all three girls wouldn't have him. The second line is, with his old shoes on and his leggings. Man who was old came a-courting one day. All three girls wouldn't have him. He came up the lane on his old walking cane, with his old shoes on and his leggings. Mama said, won't you hang up his hat? All three girls wouldn't have him. I hung up his hat and he just kicked at the cat, with his old shoes on and his leggings. Mama said, won't you show him the song?
All three girls would have him.
I showed him the saw, he just danced right strong.
With his old shoes on and his leggings.
Mama said, won't you show him to bed?
All three girls wouldn't have him.
I showed him to bed, he just stood on his head.
With his old shoes on and his leggings.
Mama said, won't you get him some meat?
All three girls wouldn't have him.
I got him some meat and oh how he did eat.
With his old shoes on and his leggings.
Mama said, won't you send him away?
All three girls wouldn't have him.
I sent him away and he left us to stay.
With his old shoes on and his leggings.
Man who was old came a-courting one day.
All three girls wouldn't have him.
He'd come up the lane on his old walking cane.
With his old shoes on and his leggings.
With his old
Shoes on and his leggings.
with his old gray beard newly shaven. You guys pick up a few tips on what not to do?
I don't think I can.
Anybody ever been to the town of Blue Mountain Lake? Adirondacks? Kind of right in the smack dab center. There's a wonderful museum there that used to be called the Adirondack Museum. It's now called Adirondack Experience. But it's got about 20 different buildings, each interpreting a different part of Adirondack life, from the natural world to iron mining to boat building. It's just a place you could spend days and days. And so much of the music that kind of was passed along through the generations up there has, in one way or another, to do with the logging industry, because, like we said, you'd have dozens of men cooped up in the woods together for months at a time. They would cut the wood all winter and spring, stack it up by the frozen banks of the streams, and then when the streams would thaw in the springtime, and they would be charging with water, they would actually throw the logs piecemeal into the rivers and float them down to the mills. So you had this tradition, and we have lots of accounts of employment in a logging camp being tied to your ability to either sing, play an instrument, dance, or tell good stories. Why? Because there was no other entertainment. And so there was a grand tradition of entertaining each other at night. Yes?
My sisters found a woman's hairpiece
Uh-huh.
and showed it to my father. And he just said, no, no women up here, ever.
Ah! So I met one woman, I met a woman whose grandmother had been a cook in a Tupper Lake logging camp back in the day. And she said, my grandmother always kept a pot of boiling water on the stove at all times. And it didn't make immediate, see, you guys are smart. It didn't make immediate sense to me. I'm thinking, why did the camp need to be humidified or something? It's like, no, this was protection. You had 50 or 60 guys cooped up for the winter. Typically, they worked 6 days a week, and they went out as soon as the sun came up, and they were out all day long. But occasionally, one would wander back when they weren't supposed to. Anyway, so this song is known as the Ballad of Blue Mountain Lake. It tells of what was reportedly a true incident that happened in the 1880s at a on a New Year's Eve in a Blue Mountain Lake logging camp. And another refrain, if you feel like jumping in, Derry down, 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 Derry down. When the God of creation fashioned our land, the wonders of nature he did understand. The choicest of these in hand he did take when he fashioned the region round Blue Mountain Lake. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Mountains in their splendor round this Eden rise. The pines with their branches that point to the skies. Disease is not cured by potions or pills, and the strength of our God is the strength of our hills. Derry down, 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 Derry down. At last the bright happy New Year it did come. The boys had some whiskey and meant to have fun. Some played the fiddles, some danced and some sang, while the walls of the shanty to their music rang. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Mitchell Canfield, we kept our shanty as mean an old grouch as you ever did see. He'd lay round the shanty all day, and at night if a man said a word, he was ready to fight. Derry down, 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 Derry down. At the stroke of 11, old Mitchell did say, we've had enough racket, I'm sure, for one day. Besides, I have got quite a pain in my head, so boys, put up those fiddles and go straight to bed. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Up spoke Patsy McDonough, the boss of our gang. He could fell the tall pines while he whistled and sang. To condemn me to silence any man I defy. In his voice there was courage, red in his eye. Derry down, 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 Derry down. So then Mitchell attempted to put Patsy out. The bold Pat with his fists soon put Mitchell to rout. Mitchell's wife, she stood there, and if truth I will tell, she was tickled to death to see Mitchell catch the business. Derry down, 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 Derry down. So we kept up the racket, the noise and the din, till the bright happy New Year we did usher in. Mitchell's a much different man, or so it is said, and he's troubled no more with that pain in his head. Derry down, 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 Derry down. A lumberman's life is the best life of all, with the boys always ready to come at my call. There seems to be health in each breath that I take. I'll live, die, and be buried in Blue Mountain Lake. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Derry down, 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 Derry down. There's also a wonderful little arts center there in Blue Mountain Lake, and about 25 years ago I was doing a concert there, and I asked the audience, if I do the Ballad of Blue Mountain Lake, are you guys all sick of that song? And they said none of them had ever heard it. So here I was, a guy from Buffalo, singing them there. A couple more fiddle pieces. We heard about fiddles in the logging camps, and there sure were. There are lots of great old paintings of these guys sitting around at night. And there might be, depending on how big the lumber camp was, the bigger ones, you actually would have guys sometimes separated by ethnicity. You know, you'd have the Frenchmen, or the frogs they call them, over in one corner, and they'd be singing their songs, and you'd have the Irishmen over here. But fiddles throughout. And so I'll play a couple more of those kind of pieces. The humidity is wreaks havoc on the tuning. So the first one, this will be a medley of 3 pieces. The second one is called Scroom Lake, which is an Adirondack community I just played a concert in 2 days ago. The third one is from a French-Canadian fiddler up there named Joseph Popour, and he did not have a title. It's what's known as a crooked tune for any musicians or dancers. It doesn't have a regular number of beats like most square dance music does. The first tune doesn't have a name. It's from this guy Dick Law, who I learned it from a recording of him, a very old recording. He played a pretty standard repertoire of fiddle music up there. But there was this one tune I had never heard before, and no one that I played it for has ever heard it. So I got a chance right before Dick Law passed away. I met him, and I said, Dick Law, I'm so glad to meet you, and there's this one piece of music you played on this recording all these years ago. I wonder if you could tell me what the name of it is. He said, well, sure. So I got my mandolin, I played the whole thing for him. He sat there and listened, he goes, never heard it. So we still don't know what the name of it is. About 10 years ago, I got to be involved. I've been involved in several different kind of heritage music projects up there, which has been a wonderful experience for me. About 15 years ago, we put together a whole website on Adirondack music, which is still out there. It's called W is for the Woods, and I believe the URL is adirondackmusic.net. But then about 10 years ago, We had known about these recordings that were made from the early 1940s to 1960s. This woman named Marjorie Lansing Porter. She was kind of a county historian up there. She was a museum curator. She was interested in all things old and Adirondack. She had collections of old farm implements from up in that area, and she knew all the histories of the war, like the War of 1812, and quite by accident she became a song collector. In 1941 she was visiting a woman who was demonstrating a spinning wheel, and the woman was quite elderly, so born in the 1870s, let's say. Lily DeLorme was her name. And Marjorie Porter, because she was curious, she noticed that this woman, as she was spinning the wool, was humming to herself. So Mrs. Porter asked her, what is the song you're humming? And she says, the woman says, oh, this is a song from the War of 1812. And Marjorie Porter's eyes lit up and she said, are there words to it? Oh yeah, there's words. Oh, could you sing it? Yeah, so off the top of her head, this old woman, Lily DeLorme, sung like 14 verses to this War of 1812 ballad. And so then the next logical question is there more? Well, it turns out there are about 100 more songs from this one woman. And so Marjorie Porter ran out and she got herself a sound scriber machine. It was like this portable dictation machine of the day. It pressed grooves into these soft blue plastic discs, and that's how it recorded. The audio fidelity is, let's say, less than desirable, but it got the job done. And so she got herself one of these, and she spent the next 20 years, she sort of got the song collecting bug, and spent the next 20 years going up and down the Champlain Valley, basically knocking on doors, asking people if they knew anybody who knew the old music. And she collected over 300 songs and pieces of fiddle music, and these recordings on these blue plastic discs sat for decades virtually unused in the Special Collections Library at SUNY Plattsburgh until we got some funding to go through them all, digitize them all, and then this was in 2014, we ended up making a new CD using modern day musicians from those same areas, singing some of these old songs that have come from those communities. We put out a songbook. There was a whole PBS special on it, which won some regional Emmys, which was thrilling. We did a concert tour, just to bring awareness to this old music from up there. So one of the songs I got out of that collection for myself, as project director, one of my main job was to listen to all 300 and some songs, which was both a blessing and a curse, because what you hear when you first put one on, it sounds roughly like this. And then, more often than not, the next thing you hear is a sort of weaker octogenarian voice singing a song that they might remember only part of, and you're trying to figure out what the melody is and what the words are and what are they singing. But it was very rewarding, because I mean, there are gems in there. So one of the songs I pulled out for myself is this thing. It's only been found once in America, and it was right up there in the Adirondacks by Mrs. Porter. It's called The Crockeryware. It's a song from Ireland and was popular in Atlantic Canada. The crockeryware is the pottery or the dishware, or some have even suggested the chamber pot, if you know what that was, in an old homestead. But the story in the song is that man comes courting young woman. Young woman's mother is not very fond of this man, so the mother puts some obstacles in the man's way to keep him from getting to the young woman. And the obstacle in this case is the crockeryware, and you'll see what happens from that. Fair and young, there lived a man in Bakerstown. Courted a lady fair and young, and in his way she put a chair. In that chair put the crockeryware like fay-aye, whack full of day like fay-aye. Well, this young spark rose about midnight. He thought he'd go to his heart's delight. This young spark rose about midnight. He thought he'd go to his heart's delight. He missed his way, I do declare. Broke his shin on the crockery ware like a fay-aye. Whack for the day, whack for the day like fay-aye. Miss Betsy lay laughing at the fun. See how well the sport went on. Miss Betsy lay laughing at the fun. See how well the sport went on. Said she, young man, I caught you fair. Blame my mother for the crockery ware like fay-aye. Whack for the day, whack for the day like fay-aye. So all young men take my advice. If you think you must see her, think it over twice. Yes, all young men take my advice. Think you must see her, think it over twice. 12 midnight if you're in bed and you think you must see her, instead just stay in bed. Oh, what the heck. Whack for the day like fay-aye. Sing you one more that I learned from that collection of recordings. It's actually a song from the California Gold Rush. So what is a Gold Rush song doing in the Adirondacks in the 19th century? Well, we have to think of these songs as kind of like a television of the day, you know, or going to the movies, you know. If someone was singing one of these songs, if it was a good song, it could transport you away from where you were and take you to some new or different situation, and that was valuable. So this was being sung in the logging camps in the Adirondacks. It came from a man named Yankee John Galusha, The Days of 49. So you've done so well on your singing part so far. If you want to jump in, this one's just slightly more involved. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of 49. Go ahead and try that. It comes around a lot. If there's any Bob Dylan fans, he actually did this song on one of his records. I'm old Tom Moore from the Bummer Shore in the good old golden days. They call me a bummer and a gin sop too, but what cares I for praise? I wander round from town to town, just like a roving sign, and the people all say, there goes Tom Moore from the days of 49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of the 49. What I love about this song, one of the things I love is each verse is more tragic than the last, but then by the time you get to the chorus, he's really repining. He wants those days back again. There was Nantucket Bill, I knew him well, a fellow that was fond of tricks. At a poker game, he was always there, and heavy with his tricks. He'd draw his cards and ante up, and go in a hatful blind. In a game of bluff, Bill lost his breath in the days of 49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of 49. Then New York Jake, the butcher boy, he was always getting tight. And every time that he'd get full, he was always hunting fights. He run up against a knife one day in the hands of old Bob Klein. and over Drake we held awake in the days of '49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of '49. Buffalo, I never can forget. He'd roar all day and he'd roar all night, and I guess he's roaring yet. One night he fell in the prospect hole in roaring bad design, and in that hole roared out his soul in the days of '49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of '49. And that old lame Jess, that poor old cuss, he never would relent. Never was known to miss a drink or ever spend a cent. At length, old Jess, like all the rest, who never would decline, all in his bloom went up the flume in the days of '49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of '49. In the days of old, in the days of gold, how oft times I repine for the days of old when we dug up the gold in the days of '49. Well, before we finish up, does anyone have questions, comments, songs to share? Anything? Happy to. Okay. Well,
I have something.
Yeah.
They used to call the hammered dulcimer the lumberjack piano, so would they have been used up
Oh,
there?
sure. I would think so. Yeah, the lumberjack piano. That's great.
That would have been like, what, in the 1800s? Late
Yeah,
1800s?
And a lot of, Western New York was a big
Right,
dulcimer
yeah.
making center. Sure, yeah, it would have been a little more bulky to carry into a logging camp through the, 3, 4, 5 miles into the woods, but sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, entertainment was really rare and valuable, so.
Because I've heard of them in Western New York, but never in the Adirondacks, but I haven't studied much.
You know who'd be a great one to ask is Dan Duggan, do you know Dan?
Mhm.
He's done all kinds of stuff up there, a long time hammer dulcimer player. Well, I'll play one more piece of music and we'll say goodbye, and then if anybody wants to talk from there, happy to. I do have some CDs and books here if anybody's interested. And I want to thank Brian for having me back one more year. Thank you, Brian. We're going to do a jail song. This is a song from the town of Elizabethtown, which is in the High Peaks region. Elizabethtown Jail was open for about 140 years. They decommissioned it about 20 years ago. But it sounds like quite a colorful place. I was reading up on it. Once I found this song, it made me curious to know more about the jail. Lots of 13 and 14-year-olds incarcerated in the Elizabethtown jail for at least spells of a couple weeks for things, lots of larceny. And interestingly, the 13 and 14-year-olds are all listed with an occupation as laborer. So already, you know, these guys are probably out of school and causing trouble and working some kind of jobs. There was also a lot of poisonings. A lot of people in there for poisoning, particularly with something called Paris green, which I looked up and it seems to be some kind of, I forget what it was some kind, it was to kill something else, like rodents or something. I'll have to look it up again. But lots of poisonings with Paris green. Anyway, there was a undersheriff and then a sheriff there named Abijah Perry. His first name was Abijah, which is not a name we see so often anymore. So you'll hear his name toward the end of the song, Abijah Perry. And the refrain is, hard times in the E-Town jail, hard times I say. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Well, prisoner in jail, it seems mighty hard, but he looks all around just to keep on his guard. With feet and irons chained down to the floor, darn their mean souls, what can they do more? Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Give it a try. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Well, the food that we have is a loaf of brown bread, and it's hard as a tack, heavy as lead, with a dish of sour soup brought in a pail. We're bound to go hungry in E-Town jail. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Covered in bugs. Bugs, they swear they'll never get bail. We're bound to get lousy in E-Town jail. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Well, there's the sheriff. Darn his eyes, he'll come to your house with a whole pack of lies. Seize on your property, that for and sell. Get drunk on the money, you steal it pretty well. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. He'd look at a man as if looking him through. Send you to Sing Sing, therefore to dwell. For $25, he'd send you to Albany. And now I'm about to finish my song. I hope that I have said nothing that's wrong. But the stars and stripes, they never will fail. To heck with Abijah Perry and the E-Town jail. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Hard times in E-Town jail, hard times I say. Thank you very much. You have a great rest of your summer. Maybe get up to the Adirondacks.
Thank you for coming. This is where I usually say 2 weeks from tonight we're going to have another program, but actually we have a bonus program this year. 1 week from tonight, next Thursday, the 18th, there's going to be a talk on the life of Art Dedrick, who was a jazz musician, educator, co-founder of Kendor Music in Belleville. His children, Jason, who had recently written this book on his father, and his daughter Sandra, who was in Art Dedrick's band and was a student of his, are going to be here speaking about this. So it just worked out. They're going to be in town that week, so they wanted to come over and do something. So if you're interested at all, come next Thursday. So thank you again.
Yeah, and I can't think of the name, but maybe a week from this.